Good afternoon, everybody. I hope we are doing very well, and welcome back to the channel after our short, well, seems pretty long international break. But we're back into the FPL content for this coming weekend, where we're going to be looking in this video at the game week 30. We're going to have a bit of a preview, just running through the fixtures, picking out the key fixtures in the week and the key players that we should be targeting, and obviously our captain choices. I just wanted to emphasise, as I've said in the previous videos, thanks for all the likes, views and subscriptions we've had so far. I really appreciate that. And if you want to check us out on other socials, we've also got the Twitter and Twitch channels on your screen now. So I appreciate you following on any of those socials. And if you've got any questions about your teams, you can also comment on the videos or just contact me on Twitter. I'm more than happy to help on whichever channel you would like some help on. So we'll switch over to the screen actually. But you can also come watch us on stream on Twitch if you like. But right, so I've got the fixtures up here for game week 30. I feel in general game week 30, there's quite a lot of fixtures to target. If I compare these to the fixtures which are in game week 31, the game week 31 fixtures are quite hard to predict compared to this week. So I feel like this week is a place where you could probably run with a lot of your teams as they are, just make a few changes between your bench. But I think a lot of people's teams will already have quite a good base in some of these teams, which can help them this week and maybe save a transfer for next week where the fixtures are a bit more difficult. If you've got a lot of big teams playing each other, for example, Spurs and Manchester United, and there's not like a key fixture. So, like as an example, if you look at the fixtures this week, you've got Chelsea against West Brom that you think straight away, even a Leeds, Sheffield United, you think this could be very one-sided. When it comes to next week, there's not much room for that. There's not many one-sided fixtures. So if you can get through this week, I'd recommend doing it because two transfers next week could be very, very beneficial. So that's just an overall point I'd like to make. So we start going through the fixtures. First fixture that we've got, as I just mentioned slightly, Chelsea against West Brom, which, in my opinion, Chelsea should win pretty comfortably. The issue I have with Chelsea at the minute is I can't bank on any of their attacking assets delivering. I think the closest you'll get there is Mount. Havertz has looked pretty decent recently, but when I think of Chelsea at the minute, I'd be thinking of defence. So if you've not got one already, I'd even consider it at least doubling up on them. You could even triple up on Chelsea because I'm pretty confident in their defence at the minute, and West Brom don't offer much attacking threat. From what I can see at the minute, unless you're going for the goalkeeper, because Mendy is pretty set in that he's going to play. If you're looking for a defender, Azpilicueta seems to be the most set in stone one. You can take, like, Rudiger's probably the second safest one, and if you want to go a bit out there and look for the attacking returns as well, you can gamble on Alonso, because I feel like gets forward a lot more than Chilwell. You've got the risk of rotation, but if you've got cover on your bench, then Alonso is a gamble you can take, because if you've got a full playing bench, you'll just have someone who'll come on for him anyway. So that's a bit of a riskier point. But like I said, that Chelsea attack, I don't have much confidence in at the minute. So ideally, Chelsea double will be quite ideal for this fixture, and their next two fixtures are quite good as well. They've also got Crystal Palace and Brighton, which are quite favourable fixtures. And even over 5 games, they have West Ham and then Fulham. So even if you're getting them in this week, or if you've got them in already, they're a good, solid defence to have up to about 5 weeks, and then the fixtures get a bit harder. So that's a good defence. Not attack for me. I won't be going anywhere near their attack. There's a lot better options. Better attacking options, you could say, you've got the next fixture, which is Leeds. I'd be surprised at the minute if a lot of people don't have Leeds players in the team anyway, because from last week where Leeds played, you wanted a good base of Leeds players. So you've got the usual suspects here. You've got one in each position. You've got Dallas, Rafinha and Bamford with my top choices in each position for Leeds. Leeds are one of these teams this season that I feel you can always have 2 or 3 of their assets in there because you just rotate them in for the good fixtures and take them out for the bad fixtures. Their run for the rest of the season, Leeds, we've got some tough fixtures coming up in the next few. So I think you could consider getting rid of Leeds players after this fixture, but this fixture, if you've got triple Leeds, you've got to play them all, even if the defensive assets, because I don't see Sheffield United really scoring. So Leeds, I expect a lot of people to have Leeds players already in their team. I do like the look of Rafinha if you've not got Rafinha in there. I'm a bit jealous not having Rafinha in my team. I've currently got 2 Leeds defenders and Bamford, so I can't get him in at the minute. But yeah, Leeds definitely, if you're looking for cheap assets, I'd probably say if you've got Leeds assets now, keep them. But if you've got double Leeds, you don't need to triple up on them because after this fixture, the games do get a bit more difficult. I think they've got a run of 3 games that's quite difficult against like Chelsea. Well, I don't think it's Chelsea. It's actually Man City, Liverpool, and Man United. So they are quite hard fixtures for Leeds. I'd probably back their attacking assets to do well, but I won't be backing on the defensive assets. But like I said, we'll talk about West Ham later as well. But Leeds and West Ham, I feel like they are quite solid mid-range teams. If you're wanting like a 6 million player, you can just go with them and they will probably set you for the rest of the season because you can rotate them out when you don't need them, but you know they can get you points when you need them in the opposite fixtures when they've got a good run of fixtures. Like for example, a Leeds have got Sheffield United, you'd back Leeds to get the points. And like if West Ham have a Brighton or someone later on, you'd expect them to get some decent points as well. So they probably, even if you're wildcarding, I'd always probably want double of both of those teams in there just to give you that good mix of price range players really as well. So we've moved down to, well, the next 2 fixtures are quite difficult in my opinion to think who's going to win. So Leicester Man City, I think could be a very interesting game, especially because Leicester are at home. I feel if it was at Man City, I might favour Man City, but here I'm not backing assets really here. We know how good Man City are defensively, so I don't think it'll be a high scoring game. I could easily see like a 1-1, which isn't really good for FPL points at all. So I currently have Gundogan and Stones, and I'm considering not even playing either of those because I don't see them having great success against Leicester. Leicester are doing very well, and I was discussing this the other day, I'd probably class them as a top 6 team. I'd probably class them as a top 6 team rather than Arsenal at the minute. So I think this fixture this week, I'm not particularly targeting at all. I might benchmark 2 Man City assets. And Man City in general, because I expect them to tie up the league probably in the next month, and then they might concentrate on the Champions League. So I'm a bit wary of having too many Man City assets. I think triple Man City at the minute is just a bit too risky for me. So that's why I've gone down to double. So, especially this week, don't be transferring in for that fixture. And I think going forward, be wary of your Man City assets if they're going to get rotated. I kind of like having Gundogan there because it's a cheaper option. If you've got KDB, that's a lot of risk for a high value asset or like a Sterling as well. So definitely stick for cheap and cheerful with Man City because if they do get a clean sheet, you'll get good points from Stones if he plays, of course, but you've always got the rotation risk. So I don't want to be putting high value into the Man City assets unless they've got the main like Maddison and Barnes out and they need to get back into fitness. So I think a few weeks down the line, Leicester have a good fixture run and we could be looking at the Leicester attacking assets again, like Iheanacho at the minute as well, doing very well. But especially for this fixture, don't target either of those teams in my opinion. Don't focus your transfers on them. I'd say similarly for Arsenal against Liverpool, I don't think anyone's rushing to get Arsenal players in general. And, well, they're quite solid defensively, Arsenal at the minute. But I'll say that and Liverpool will run away with it. But Liverpool aren't convincing this season at all. So, again, this fixture is not one I will be targeting straight away. We're also going to do, following this video, we're going to do a look ahead for the rest of the season, the fixtures. And I'll point out to you in that video that actually in a few weeks' time, Liverpool's fixtures do get quite good. So we might be looking at Liverpool fixtures further down the line, but for this week, we don't want Liverpool assets really. You might stick with like your Salah or your Jota, but I wouldn't be going further than that. So we're going to have Southampton against Brighton. Again, it's another one of these games where I'm a bit... I feel like Southampton will probably just win it, but it could easily be a 2-1, which doesn't give great value, in my opinion, for FPL, because a 1-1 is probably your worst kind of scoreline you want, because it ruins both your clean sheets and then your attacking assets can't get a lot of points. I think Ings, you're always worried about Ings' fleetness at the minute. Che Adams is an alright lower value pick, but he's not exceptional. There's a lot better options like an Antonio or a Bamford. So I'd be straying away from this fixture, and Burnley are just a bit hit and miss as well. You could make a case for Southampton's defence because Burnley aren't very good at scoring away from home, but again, like Chelsea's a lot better place to be targeting rather than their defence. So there's not much value from that fixture at all. So go down to Newcastle against Spurs. This is another one. I feel like a very good fixture for Spurs. On paper, it's a very good fixture if they can perform as they. Well, we've seen them be inconsistent. They can do very well one match and then be inconsistent the next. But this is on paper, it's a very good fixture for Spurs. So I believe quite a few teams will have good Spurs assets already in the team. I expect a lot of people will have Kane. I think Kane will be one of the most captained this week because of the fixture, which makes sense. It's probably between him and Bruno, between who you'd captain if you're going for one of your bigger assets. There's the doubt about Son playing, so I wouldn't particularly be getting Son in there. I think Kane and Bale are your two main assets for Spurs. But then again, also, you could make a case for like a Lucas Moura, who's a lot cheaper asset, and based on the last few games, Mourinho kind of lost trust with Bale because, especially the Arsenal game, he just didn't pull his weight at all. So, as with Spurs, always go for Kane. If you want a double, you can take a risk on Bale, but you know we can get that high return, and then there's a cheaper option of like a Lucas Moura. But especially with those two, you've got the chance of rotation. Kane is basically nailed on, so Kane will always be, well, as long as he's playing for Spurs, probably always going to be Spurs' best attacking asset. So if you haven't got him at this point, which I hope you already have, then Kane is always a good option to go to. He's definitely, well, it's between him and Bruno. I wouldn't be surprised if Kane is the highest captain this week. So then we go down to Villa and Fulham. Again, it's a very difficult one to call. Like I said, there's some standout fixtures this week, but then there is a few difficult ones to call. Villa aren't the same team without Grealish, and I feel like this is a fixture Fulham could be targeting to get 3 points, their need for the relegation fight. Fulham have tightened up really well at the back, so I expect this to be quite low scoring again. It could be another 2-1 or 1-1. So there's not much value in any of these assets, in my opinion. If you've got a cheap defender in there, I don't mind you throwing them in because it could easily just become 0-0. I know quite a few people have Ollie Watkins, could score 1 goal, but I don't see him having a very high ceiling. So I've no issue with you playing them in this fixture, but I wouldn't be investing in their fixtures, particularly long term. There's potential further down the line that Villa will get a double game week against Everton. I think that's one of the only fixtures that hasn't been rearranged so far. There are a few from game week 33 further down the line that will be postponed because of the League Cup final. But from all the previous fixtures, there's still that Villa versus Everton one that can be rearranged later on. So having Villa assets for the future could help you, but then Everton is not the easiest fixture, so you're not going to get a huge amount of benefit on there. So as I mentioned, Mr. Bruno, we'll move on to Manchester United against Brighton, which I think, as I said, with Kane, will be one of the higher captain players with Bruno. I feel like Brighton are not too bad defensively, they're not bad at attacking wise either. So I can easily see them scoring at Old Trafford, but I feel that the brand of football they play is quite open. I expect it to be quite an open game. Here's me saying this before it is 0-0. But I can see Man United scoring quite a few as well. It could easily end up like a 3-2, for example, to United or something. So I see Bruno as a pretty strong asset in this one. I know a lot of people brought in Brighton defenders for last game week. I'd be very surprised if we kept a clean sheet. I'd be disappointed if United didn't score as a United fan as well. So I wouldn't be playing Brighton defenders in this. So, like, Bruno at the minute is a standout one. I wouldn't trust. I think Martial got injured for France last night. Rashford's not up to fitness. Cavani's a gamble. Pogba's just coming back from injury as well. Outside of Bruno, I wouldn't be risking it on the United players. Well, I understand people probably have got Luke Shaw in there. He can get the attack in return, so if I had Luke Shaw, I'd be playing him as well. But I'd avoid playing any Brighton players. And Bruno is a very safe captaincy option for this week, and I expect a lot of people to captain him for that. So then we go down to Everton against Crystal Palace. When I see this, Crystal Palace without Zaha are just not great in my opinion. So when I first looked at this fixture, I was like, this is a good defensive fixture for Everton. But Zaha has had the international break to get back his fitness. I think he played 2 games before the international break, so I expect Zaha to be firing a bit more in this fixture. So I think that Everton clean sheet is a bit more risky. But I think Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison could be very valuable assets here because I don't if I was pitching this game, I'd say probably like 3-1 to Everton. So I might consider playing Digne because I hope he can get a clean sheet, but it's not guaranteed now as a halfback. But I do like my defenders, so I might be banking on the clean sheet with a bit of Digne in there, and he's a bit of a channel icon after we triple captain him in the past double game week, and he did well for us, so we could be looking at that. But like I said, for Palace, I don't think at the minute I'd go for any asset outside of Zaha, but I'd like to see him play a few more fixtures before I even thought about getting him in. Yeah, so like I said, if I was choosing Everton assets, you've got Digne, DCL, or Richarlison. I wouldn't go for DCL and Richarlison. I wouldn't have more than, I think, no, yeah, I'd just go for like DCL and Digne as your only viable options, probably. It depends if you prefer Richarlison to DCL. It's your own personal choice on that one, really. And as I mentioned with Villa, they've also got a double game week that you'd expect them to get sometime in the future. So if you're holding two, that's not a bad thing going forward. And then we go to the last fixture, which is Wolves against West Ham. Wolves, if this was last season, you'd just be backing Wolves to do very well. But Wolves are a very funny team this season. I don't expect them to concede a lot at home, but I don't expect them to score a lot either. I could see this. If I was saying it now, I'd probably say West Ham would have win that 2-1, which isn't a great result again for FPL points. But again, similar to the Everton fixture, I wouldn't be adverse to playing like a Cresswell or a Dawson because they've got that attacking potential, and West Ham could easily win this game 2-0. And as I mentioned with Leeds above, West Ham are a very good middle table team with cheap options you can easily use. You've got your Dawson, your Cresswell, as I mentioned. You've got your Lingard, you've got Souček, a bit of an icon Souček when he's on form as well. And you've got Antonio as well. So there's a lot of value picks there you can be using to just enable other places within your team. But this fixture isn't particularly good, but I'd expect you already have West Ham assets in there, which you don't need to transfer them out. They've got a decent run going forward as well. Like on the tracker for the rest of the season, they are number one for their fixtures. If you look at their tracker, there's 9 game weeks left and 6 of them are green. So they are top of the tracker. As we'll mention on the next video on the channel, we're going to look at the rest of the fixtures. And so going forward, we probably just want to keep 2 or 3 West Ham assets to rotate in and out of those games because they've got Leicester, Chelsea and Everton, which is like some of them are very hard, some of them are indifferent. So if you want to rotate them out for those games, it makes sense. But I'd be keeping those, as I said, with the Leeds assets, as like a stonewall, or just keeping in for the whole of the season. You don't particularly need to worry about them, just like set and forget players. Right, so as I mentioned with the captains, Bruno and Kane are expected to be the 2 highest captains here, highest captained in the week. I can't see many other players running them close. You can argue like Salah, but if you look at the fixtures, Brighton and Newcastle are a lot easier than Arsenal. I can't see past those 2 as the highest captain's assets. I've also got down here, I like a defender as a captain because it's worked so many times this season. So I've highlighted the Chelsea defence as a very good place to go. As I mentioned earlier, Digne, just because he's a bit of a channel icon, but that is my personal preference. And I've got a strange feeling about Dallas. I captained Dallas last week, it didn't work. But sometimes I think, right, we kind of had this with Cancelo earlier in the season. Sometimes they just look like they're going to return, and eventually they will return. For example, Dallas really should have scored in the last game, and we're just unlucky they didn't score, and it could have come off. So I'd be going Bruno, Kane, or a defensive asset, like I said, from a Chelsea or Leeds. Like Leeds, like if you want us banked on points, I'd go for a Chelsea defender. Famous last words, of course. But then I've also got Leeds and Everton in my mind. I do like a bit of a differential captain. I like to keep away from my like Brunos and my Kanes. I have them in my team, but then I don't captain them. And then you kind of just hoping they don't do well later on in the week, which is a bit strange as they're your asset, but that's how it is. You've got to be different a bit sometimes to gain rank, but it's all personal choice on that. Like on that opinion, really. You can't just be following the crowd sometimes if you're trying to get up rank. But there we go, guys, for this week. I hope that gave you a bit of a preview of who I think you should be tagged in this week. And of course, if you've got any questions, just leave them in the comments or contact me on Twitter or anywhere else you want to. I'll even take a look at your teams if you want me to, see how I can restructure them. I can imagine if people have got wildcards left, they'll be thinking about when should we play the wildcard. In my opinion, looking at this week, there's some favourable fixtures. I think a lot of people will be wildcarding next week and tailoring their teams for the last 8 fixtures after this week. So if you want help with your wildcard teams or anything, I'm more than happy to help. And as I mentioned, we're going to be doing a follow-up video this week where we're going to be looking at the rest of the fixtures for the rest of the season. Like I said, we've got 9 weeks left, and I think it's good to have a look at those in focus the whole 9 weeks, and then you can, especially if you're building a wild card, it's a good tool to use and getting the teams you need to be targeting, which can like boost your rank massively, especially if you're competing against people who haven't got a wild card. So I'm hoping that video will be beneficial to you all as well. But like I said at the start of the video, I appreciate everyone's support, and if you need any help, just reach out. And my Twitter and Twitch links will be down below, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good evening.